Welcome in, guys. We are here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, episode number 2 of the Mayflower Sports podcast. I'm Andrew McGinnis. I have Jacob Smith to my left, and we have Derek Martin, president and founder of the Halifax Wanderers. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to join you guys for only your second one. I'm honored. Yeah.
Obviously, the Wanderers are a huge thing in the city right now. Can you just give us a little bit of insight on what made you kind of want to get involved with that? Because in Nova Scotia, soccer's big, but it's not as big as, say, something like hockey or even basketball now. So what made you kind of gravitate towards bringing a soccer team here and really trying to put your all into it to make it flourish?
Yeah, it goes back a while. So I owned a company called Sports and Entertainment Atlantic, and we put on sporting events that were special events, international or national competitions. We did things like FIVB beach volleyball down on the waterfront, university sport basketball championships, university hockey championships, international rugby. So we were always trying to find little niches where we could do some special events that were big here in the city, because I moved here from Ontario. Okay. I grew up in Hamilton. I played American football, so I came out to St. FX to play football there. I went back to Ontario and got my start kind of in working by getting an internship to work on the Vanier Cup, which is the college football championship. So right out of the gate, I kind of started working in sports marketing and developed a real love for it and a passion for it. So I met my wife in Toronto. She's from Halifax. We just said that's always the way to get people back. And when we got here, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And, you know, I worked for a little bit, but I really knew that I wanted to do sports marketing, and there weren't really a lot of jobs in sport. There was the Mooseheads, and that was really it, or Atlantic University Sport. So I started this company and just started kind of hustling to figure out how we could, you know, bring some cool events here, because I thought Halifax deserved to, you know, have some cool things for people to go watch. And anyway, so after doing that for, 8-10 years, we actually hosted I had this vision to host an international rugby match at the Wanderers grounds, because I was always fascinated by, why this really, what I thought was an ideal location in the heart of the city was completely underutilized, and nobody ever went there. Nobody ever used it. Nobody even really knew where it was. And
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really crazy, because in all the work we did attracting, other events here, one of the huge attributes that Halifax has is the downtown.
Yeah.
So what makes the Scotiabank Center, the old Metro Center, really attractive to a lot of international, events that are looking at arenas is the fact that the minute you step outside of the door, you're in the downtown, you're around bars, you're around restaurants, you're around hotels. It's got a vibe, it's got an energy, it's got, a lot going on. So the fact that we had this outdoor field that was almost doing the exact same thing, just over Citadel Hill, yet no one was using it, just always boggled my mind. So
what's going on there? Like
nothing. Like it's funny now that we've done this, and you hear some people now saying how they want it to go back to the way it was. But what it was literally a fenced in, crappy piece of dirt. Like it was a really, no one could use it because it was a natural grass field that had no irrigation, no drainage. So anytime it rained, it would turn into a big mud bath. You couldn't book sports there because it was part of the city field. So if it rained, you had to cancel, right? Like they do for youth sports. So everybody was gravitating towards using artificial turf, like high school football, and even soccer wasn't really using it because they just couldn't host anything. And so it sat there empty, and a lot of people would just go walk their dogs, and dog poop would be everywhere, and it just wasn't a really great spot. Yet it was in this amazing location. You're beside the public gardens, which is one of the most beautiful spots in Halifax. You can see Citadel Hill from anywhere on the field. It's this really unique spot. So anyway, I pitched the city on this idea of, I want to bring international sport here. The field at the time was not good, so we couldn't host soccer, because for soccer you need a really pristine surface. The ball's rolling on the ground all the time. It's got to be good.
A little different than rugby.
Rugby, they can get by. Obviously, they want it to be as good as possible, but you can get by with not as great as you can for soccer. So anyway, we picked rugby, made a pitch to Rugby Canada to host an international men's game if I could get them an opponent. Went over to Europe, found a professional team in Glasgow, Scotland, that was willing to come over and play. figured out how to get temporary bleachers, portable toilets, all of that stuff into the Wanderers grounds because I'd done it for the beach volleyball event down in a parking lot. So I had some connections and knew how to pull it off. And we kind of got it all done, committed, had some funding. It was all going to work. We sold 5,000 tickets. We sold it out. And the week of the game, the coaches from the both teams flew in on I remember it like it was yesterday. They flew in on the Tuesday, and they knew that there was some concerns about the quality of the pitch, right? Like I had been honest about it's not the best. Like when you get here, just make sure. And sure enough, they went straight from the airport to the Wanderers grounds. They didn't go to the hotel. And I got a call sitting on my back deck at about 11 o'clock at night from the guy I had done the deal with in Scotland saying, my coach just called me and he's refusing to play. He says the pitch is completely unsafe and they're going to get on the plane tomorrow and go home.
Wow.
So I was in a moment where I had to try to figure it out. Luckily, we had a few other locations as backup plans. We were able to convince them that one of those, which turned out to be Graves Oakley, I don't know if you guys know where that is, which they've now since turned into a really cool rugby training ground. But at the time, it was just some open fields. We went out there the Wednesday morning. We walked it. We kind of figured out how we could reconstruct the fields to make it all work, to get enough space. Made the decision by 4 o'clock that we were going to do it. Had to call in a bunch of people and workers to move all the infrastructure we had already moved in at the Wanderers grounds out to Graves Oakley. Had to offer refunds to the 5,000 people that had bought tickets. Luckily, only about 25 of them asked for one. They all just said, we still want to go. We'll go out to Graves Oakley, and we pulled it off. And it was a great day. It was a beautiful, sunny, day. It was gorgeous. We drank a lot of beer. People had a great time.
Yeah.
But what it did is it embarrassed the city that they had this, field in the heart of downtown that they had, wanted to try to host international competitions on. That was so bad they had to move.
Yeah.
So that fall, City Council voted to do a huge reconstruction project, and basically they bulldozed the entire surface and built it from the ground up into a proper pitch. So they put in the proper drainage, and they put in the proper base, and they put in the proper sod, and they put in an irrigation system, and they did all the work that was needed to turn it into what you see now, which is a really beautiful, pristine, flat.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice. I'd argue it's one of the top 3 grass surfaces in Canada.
Wow.
And it's a huge asset that we have. So once that happened, and we had now a field that you could really play on, it was just luck of, timing that a friend of mine I had been doing some work with back in Toronto called me up and said, I've been hired by this group of people who are trying to put together this new professional soccer league in Canada, and they'd really like to see how they could get on the East Coast because there were some people involved that had been involved in the CFL, and obviously that's always been the challenge is how do you get coast to coast with a league. And they said, I know from talking to you before, there's no facilities out there, but we want to just start trying to figure out a solution. And I said, well, your timing's pretty good because I can tell you that there's going to be a solution.
Yeah.
Because I've been part of this solution is that they're making, this is the point, they were still building it, but they're building out a perfect soccer pitch in the heart of downtown. And I really think that's where it's got to be. Like if you want to be successful in Halifax, you have to be downtown. And I'd been watching with interest all the CFL discussions and everything going on, and being in this business of selling tickets and trying to create atmosphere, I knew that you can't do it out in Dartmouth or Burnside or Bears Lake. Like it just does not work the way it works when you can have this downtown experience. So, I basically just kept talking to him and just said after a couple of conversations, I was just like, I've got to be the guy to do this. Like this is like, I want to do this. This is going to work. I tell people all the time, I didn't know soccer at the time. I never played soccer growing up. I was a football guy. Honestly, I didn't love the sport because I just never really been into it. But I knew it could work here. So that kind of started the process. And then here we are 6 years later with a thriving club going downtown, and hopefully on our way to bigger and better things on the pitch too.
Well, it sounds like opportunity just knocked, and you said it kind of worked out. You got the call at the right time, and I love that you said, obviously you played football and maybe soccer wasn't your big sport at the time, but I'm sure it's a big part of your life now, and I'm sure you become a fan. Really, there's just so much to sport that goes on behind the scenes that I think fans of a team or even, athletes growing up don't understand about pro sports. And you talk about kind of that process and the pitch and, fixing all that stuff up. What can you say just about not just yourself, but the whole team you hired when the Wanderers became a thing?
Yeah, I think, it's more than just opportunity knocking. It's, being in position when opportunity presents itself, that you've had the experiences and you've got kind of the skills ready to go in the moment to take advantage of it. So I think that answered your question a little bit, because it wasn't just about, getting lucky in the moment. It was having 8 years of knowing what kind of makes this market tick from a ticket sales standpoint, and how do you fill up the Scotiabank Center for basketball? How do you fill it up for a made-up stadium for beach volleyball? Like, what are the tricks and the tools that you can learn about trying to make something interesting and fun for not just hardcore fans? Because beach volleyball, there aren't really any hardcore fans.
Right.
You've got to create an experience that draws people in, and then once they're there, they appreciate the athleticism of the athletes. Then they're like, oh my God, like I had no idea they had to run that much. And oh my God, they're jumping and running in sand. That's got to be crazy. And people come to appreciate it. Much like I find they do with soccer.
I was just going to say, like, a lot of so I was like you, I wasn't really a big soccer fan. A lot of my friends later in life got me into soccer. They played like their whole lives, and I kind of got into it. And it's the same thing now where, like, I'll have some of my other friends that will go to the games and they'll just be like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that it was like this.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much more fun to be there and be in the atmosphere and just be around a bunch of people that are really enjoying the game, that I think kind of is what drags people into the Wanderers now. And that's why there's it's become so much more than a cult following. Like, it's really a city thing now, I believe.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I find, that there was always a bit of a misconception, I thought, or misperception about it needing to be a soccer crowd, right? Like, everybody talked about, well, do you have enough soccer players? Do you have enough soccer fans? And I always thought, that's not who we need to get. Like, the soccer fans in actuality, I found the soccer fans the hardest ones to bring in.
Yeah.
Because they already have a preconceived notion of what's good and what's bad. And they know,
right, okay,
what it's like to watch Real Madrid or to watch the Premier League. And they know what good quality is.
Yep.
So they have a bit of a stubbornness almost to accept, what's this local league? Like, these players aren't going to be very good. They're not going to be doing, it's not worth my time to watch these guys. So for us, it was more about creating that experience where everybody that goes in there is in there to have a good time. And once you create the atmosphere, then people are coming in to just be there. But the soccer people eventually kind of got pulled in, because all their friends would be saying, oh, you must be going to the Wanderers game. You're a big soccer guy. And if they didn't have an answer of, I am going, people would be like, why not? Like, I thought you were a big soccer fan. And then once they started going, they were starting to appreciate that, you know what, these guys are pretty good, and it is entertaining, and it's good soccer, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
And
well, the Halifax Mooseheads are like that too. A lot of people go to those games that are there for an experience with their family or a date night out or just like something to do. Like, even season ticket holders, a lot of them, probably never even watched hockey growing up or were huge. It's something to do in the city. And so I find that super interesting. You say that the soccer guys were the last of your concern, or the people to grab, really. It was the casual fans. But, I'm surprised that you say that, bringing those people in and compared to the casual fans. I want to ask really the difference between building the Wanderers and marketing them compared to the FIVB World or the AUS Championships, because I thought that it would be kind of more so about all the operations, but the fans would come versus as volleyball. Like you said, we know that Volleyball Nova Scotia has a decent following, but are people going to come? That's kind of like a mystery. The marketing's there. I figure with the Wanderers, you would have already known you'd get it. With AUS, there's fans, there's universities. But what's the difference for you, like the hardest challenge you found for the Wanderers compared to the other stuff that you've done with AUS or FIVB or the new things? Because you're bringing people in still. You're bringing players in. You're bringing employees in. It's still similar, but definitely different, right?
Yeah, it's very different from a business standpoint. Like, to run those special events, you're putting something on for 3 or 4 days. So, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and there's build up and there's preparation, but there's a very kind of defined start date and end date that you can then take a break and move on and do something else. So the Wanderers is a business. Like we're if you count all of our game day staff, we're up over 200 employees that we employ throughout the year. And, it's a pretty significant financial operation. So our biggest challenge with the Wanderers is how do we sustain things over time, right? And I think a special event, if you do it right, you can build up some excitement, you can get through it. But people usually then need a little break after it's done, like their annual events or their maybe even biannual events, and people build up kind of excitement because of that. With us, we're going every week.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got to find a way to really keep that energy going. And we're experiencing it right now. The reality is we're not doing that great on the pitch, and it's a challenge, right? Like we're struggling a bit, and we've really got to find a way to fight through that and keep as much positive momentum as we can. I use that word with my staff all the time. It's momentum works both ways.
Yeah.
When momentum's positive and it's going in your direction, it's great. But it can quickly turn and start to go the other way. So we have to work really hard to stop it if we start to sense that it's going on the negative direction.
Do you talk with the players or coaches when things are tough, or you stay out of that?
Yeah, not the players so much. I try to respect, the hierarchy, if you will, of, Steven and Matt are the two guys that I've kind of hired to run the football operations side. And obviously I talk to them every day and try to, keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on and how things are going at training and who's injured and who's looking good and who's maybe not looking good. And we're always talking about new players that we need to add in and bring. So, I talk to them a lot. When I talk to the players, it's usually very just casual and checking in and seeing how they're doing. Like I'll pop by training and just say hi to everybody and see how they are, but I'm not qualified to have really any conversations with them about how they're playing or, what technique they should be using. I trust the guys that we've hired to do that.
I think that's pretty big of you, though, because I think a lot of times when it's your business or, you part own something or own something, it's very easy to kind of start to micromanage and kind of have your fingerprints all over the place. But for someone like you, I think it's actually like really impressive that, you're able to sit there and say like, hey, I'm not the soccer guy that Steven is. So like, I'll let Steven handle that sort of stuff and I'll just check in with Steven to see how it's going. But I just have a quick question, and I don't know how much you can really talk about it because we've been talking a lot about the grounds and the atmosphere. I know there's been a lot of talk about a new stadium. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're interested in? Obviously, because of the success that the team's having, and I think we have like the highest percent of attendance in the league. I think it was like last time I checked, it was like 97% for most of the year. Is that something that you're interested in? Is it something that you're trying to keep at the Wanderers ground, or is it more so you might have to look somewhere else if you kind of want to expand?
Yeah, so it's not just something I'm interested in. It's essential to the future of the club. So okay. I think as fun as it is at the Wanderers grounds, we always have to remember that it's not a long-term solution. Like we rent those bleachers, which at a very considerable cost every single year. We shouldn't have to have fans using portable toilets. We can't serve food at the Wanderers grounds because we have no running water. So we can't even bring in vendors because Nova Scotia restaurant laws won't let you serve if you don't have running water. So there's all of these challenges that are based on the fact that we literally just wanted this to happen so bad that we told the city and the province, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll figure out a solution to prove to you guys that this is the best location you could possibly have for an outdoor sports and entertainment venue. We'll do it for a few years, and then we really need to sit down and talk about if we're right, I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is and prove that I'm right. Once it's proven that we're right, we need you guys to kind of help us out and get something here that's not just for us, but it's for the entire community. We'll be a tenant. We'll pay our fair share. Like we'll do all those things, but this city deserves, in my opinion, a really nice outdoor sports and entertainment venue for about 10,000 fans. Okay. That's the number that I think works based on our population. It's why the Scotiabank Center works at 10,000 capacity, because that pretty much fits where we are. And I think it fits where we are for the next, decade. It's always good to be sold out, right? It's always good to have more demand than you have supply. It's not good to be the other way.
Yeah.
And you made the reference earlier to basketball.
Yeah.
I think having done the Final 8 basketball here for a number of years, I think there's a bit of a misconception that Halifax is a basketball town. I don't know if it is. I think Halifax is a university sport town.
Definitely.
And the reason the Final 8 works, the reason the AUS basketball championships work, is because you're bringing in 6 alumni groups of 6 local universities. And everybody looks at it. You guys, if you went to university, you're going to go hook up with a bunch of your friends that you maybe haven't seen for a while. You're going to say, oh, let's meet up downtown and go to the game. And,
exactly.
And then we'll go out after for a night out. It might be the only time you see that group of guys for that year or 6 months. And that's why it works. And I think what we saw with the Rain Men and then the Hurricanes was them believing that there was this great basketball market here that didn't show up just to watch basketball.
Yeah.
They were showing up for the fun and for the camaraderie of seeing old friends. And the thing that really did them in was they were playing in a venue that was just too big for them.
Yeah.
Right. And I met with Andre a couple times and I said, you've really got to move. You've got to go to St. Mary's or you've got to go somewhere else where you can create the impression that it's a tough ticket to get, because people never know. People don't really know how many people are at an event. If you go and it's wall to wall and you can't find a seat, you'll have an amazing time, whether it's 1,000 people, 10,000 people, or 100,000 people. You leave there feeling energized and like, that was awesome. That was so much fun. Right. It was like packed. And I'm glad I was there. And like one of the people that got to be there. And that's true universally. But it works the other way. And if you're in a venue with 10,000 seats and there's only 1,000 people there, you're looking around wondering why you are the only person who thought it was cool to come here.
Yeah.
And it's such a basic human thing, right? Like, and it's no one's fault. It's just what you can't help but do it. You're like, why am I here if no one else thinks it's important to be here? So venue, and that's one of the secrets, I think, to why we've been successful is our venue's not too big. So right away out of the gate, we were able to create this sense of, man, I want to go. Like, I want to be there. And maybe it's going to be hard to get a ticket. So I got to get a ticket early. And then once I get a ticket early, then that all feeds on itself to make the venue look fuller so that when you go to buy a ticket, you're like, oh my gosh, where am I going to go? There's not very many tickets left. But it's this really interesting phenomenon of, making sure that your venue size fits your market. And I think that's something we have to be really careful of when we talk about a new stadium. Yes, I think we've got room to grow because to your point, we're 97% sold out all the time.
Yeah.
But we don't want to bite off too much either. And to go from 6,500 to, maybe 8,500 to start with the ability to expand by another 1,500 in a couple of years, that feels like a reasonable jump. To go from 6,500 to 15,000, I think we're biting off maybe too big of a chunk of the apple, right?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up for that. Just sure. I know I've been somebody that I've been kind of torn on it, right? Because I really love the atmosphere there. And obviously, like you said, like it was always something that was going to be temporary. Do you ever worry about, with the new stadium, maybe losing some of that atmosphere? Because I feel like I don't think there's another team in the province that has quite the atmosphere that we have, just even with like the kitchen, and then you have the beer gardens on both sides. Like, it's just one of those stadiums that when you get to, there's a lot going on and everybody's kind of attentive and into the game. Are you worried about that at all with maybe having a new stadium?
I wouldn't say I'm worried about it. I'm very much aware of it. And I think in some other interviews I've said one of the keys to what works at the Wanderers grounds is setting up lots of different types of experiences. So the people that are in the kitchen have a wicked time. Yeah. Their experience is very different than the corporate suite experience that's happening in the shipping containers at the other end. But you need a place for both, right? And we've got hardcore, soccer fans who sit right in the center and, listen to the chanting and the songs, but their eyes are just fixated on the game and they're watching the movement and they know exactly who's going where and who's doing what. Then you got the kids sitting on kind of the edges who are kind of trying to get their mom to take them to go get a hot dog or to do something else half the time. And all of it is important because we can't, like back to my earlier point, you can't fill up the stadium just with the hardcore soccer guys. You can't fill it up with just the guys who are there for the party and the singing and the chanting and the, jumping up and down.
Yeah.
The patio is awesome because that's really our easy entry point for people who maybe are coming to their first game. You've got to give them the cheapest possible ticket to get in because they're not really there for anything other than, I kind of heard this was a fun place to be. I want to go check it out.
Yeah.
Well, when they come in and they're in the patio and they're standing underneath all of the guys in the kitchen, guys and girls in the kitchen going nuts, they're mesmerized by what the heck is this? Like, I've never seen this before. This isn't like a Mooseheads game, or this is totally different.
It's the experience.
It's the experience. But then hopefully they progress, then maybe they say, oh, well, next time I'm going to come and I'm going to take it up there and I'm going to try to sit in the kitchen. Then after they do that, oh, maybe I'll go sit in the stands over there and see what it's like on that side. And then, oh, I enjoyed this one, so that's the one I'm going to buy a season ticket in. And it just is this kind of, evolution of the experience for people.
Trickle-down effect almost.
Yeah. So I'm not worried about it, but it will absolutely be factored into how we design a new stadium, and we'll make sure that there's always going to be a kitchen.
Definitely.
Right? And how that kitchen, maybe the kitchen has a roof on it, which is only going to add to the experience because now all of that sound is going to be kind of kept in, and it's going to be that much louder and that much more impressive. And we have to keep a ground level patio. Yeah. Because that is part of it. That's part of the party atmosphere. It's part of what makes it unique and different. So all these things we need the corporate side. Like, you need the suites and you need that piece because it's a higher price ticket. It helps with the economics of the whole thing, and you want that kind of corporate support there that bleeds into some other marketing elements for us. So it's definitely an important part of whatever we do going forward.
There's definitely a little bit for everybody, like you said, like the suites or the kitchen is just madness. I mean, if you're just having a beer, just standing there underneath, like even just like looking to find your seat, it fires you up. It gets you excited. I'll never forget. It's funny you mentioned the Hurricanes, or back when it was the Rainmen. I had a co-op program with Eastlink, so I was the sound guy. My job was literally to stand, and it was not really a fun job, but I was standing during the timeouts with like the sound gun, just pick up what the coaches were saying. And I'm looking around because I've been to plenty of Hurricane games at the Metro Center, and the environment is just, they've got the PA announcer. I believe it was the same guy that does it for you now.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah,
Chris, and you're in a huge building. You see what the Mooseheads have done, but it's taken them years to get that. And so I love what you said. You almost would rather there be more demand than, not enough. Mm-hmm. And so my point is that the Hurricanes, that was the most electrifying environment I've ever seen, and they're playing at St. Mary's. They absolutely packed the place. People were standing. And so, you look at the Wanderers grounds and, you're talking just when we first started this podcast out about how central it is, the great location it is. And the whole time you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, what are you going to say when we ask you about moving, because do you want it to be too big, and how big can you make the capacity? But you talk about kind of convincing the city, not really convincing them, but kind of like selling them on it with concerts and different other events that are going on and things like that. Would you ever kind of look at like a partnership with the CFL, with the Schooners or anything like that, a Wanderers Schooners, or is it just kind of you're renting the venue from the city?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. So I don't know if I ever answered your question about would we move. So I don't think so. Like I don't think there's any scenario I can see where we aren't at the Wanderers grounds. The Wanderers grounds will stay as a sports field, right? So there's no doubt that it will remain and be a place. I think we could keep doing what we're doing, which unfortunately isn't sustainable. But we're at a point now where there's enough support and enough people have seen it work that I'm pretty confident something will happen. Yeah. It's just how does it look and what's the partnership look like, and you got to play politics a little bit, and I'll be the first to say it's a tough time, right? We're coming out of COVID. You're seeing things like the library or the art gallery being put on hold and postponed. Financially, it's not the greatest time, but we still have to be looking to make some investments in a growing city, and more people are moving here every year, and they're all looking for things to do, and how do they stay entertained, and how do they have fun, and want to keep living here and attract more people here. So I think it's going to happen. We just have to kind of keep working through it. In terms of the CFL, I I've been doing this business for a long time, and I think I'm uniquely positioned. I played football. I grew up playing football. I love football. The reality is there just isn't a football market in Nova Scotia, and it's definitely not a CFL market.
You don't think 2 weekends ago proved that there is?
Absolutely not.
Just a 1 week thing.
If anything, that proved my point. Like, they only built 10,000 seats because they only thought they were going to get 10,000 people,
right.
and 8,500 of those seats had already been sold 2.5 years ago. So they only had to sell 1,500 seats to that, really. And it's not that you can't pull it off. I come from a special event background, as I told you guys. So
you've proven to do very well with it.
I think I could host a CFL game once a year and get 20,000 people, no problem. But can you sustain over 10 games in rain, eventually in snow, and are people a hardcore fan enough to come out and watch that? And I always use, youth sports as a bit of a guide and a judge, and bars as a judge. So the two things that always show me that there's an issue here with football is there is one youth football program in Halifax called the Halifax Argos.
Yeah.
And they can't field a team. So my friend has a son. We play football together. His son wants to play, and it looks like they're not going to be able to put a team together because there aren't enough kids to play.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. The second thing is walk around on a Grey Cup Sunday and watch how many parties are going on in bars around downtown Halifax.
I hear you. I'm a CFL fan. He's not. Most of my friends don't like the CFL.
You're talking to the wrong guy.
And I'm a CFL fan. Like, don't get me wrong. I went to the Grey Cup. I loved it. I had a great time.
Were you there last year?
I was in Hamilton. Yeah,
it was awesome.
It was awesome.
You were there too, weren't you?
Yeah, that was my first ever CFL game.
Oh yeah, the halftime show was really good.
It was great.
But though those are two small little things. But to me, they're very indicative of, where we're at as a culture here in Nova Scotia and specifically in Halifax with supporting the CFL, because it's not been part of our life. I grew up in Hamilton. It's part of your life. Like, there's games going on, the other teams, you hear about it all the time in the news. Here, no one ever hears about it, or it's never talked about. So I think it's much harder to jump into a CFL franchise that requires you to sell 18 to 20,000 seats a game to be breaking even. That's really tough. What I really liked about a new soccer league is that at 5,000 people, we're doing okay, right? And I thought we could do 5,000 people because I've done 5,000 people for these beach volleyball things or university sports. So 5,000 a game, that I can swallow as a risk because I think we can get there. But there's a huge difference between 5,000 and 20,000. Right. And that's what's always scared me about the CFL is they're so well established and they have teams in Western Canada that get 30,000 people a game. So to be able to compete with them, you got to be able to jump right in and get that. And here, I just don't think you could. So that tells you a little bit about what, from a business standpoint, what my confidence level would be with owning my own CFL team.
Makes a lot of sense. I can't argue it.
And the other big thing is the Wanderers grounds. We've done all the work. We've got some renderings and some plans we're going to release soon. We can get a 10,000 seat stadium on the current footprint. We don't have to change anything.
Nice.
We don't have to move anyone. Like the Bengal Lancers get to stay that are our neighbors. The Lawn Bowling Club gets to stay. We basically just replace what we've put up with a more, a nicer, better, still modular, but a much nicer modular setup. That's a nice horseshoe design that goes around. We can still keep our shipping containers. And we're at, 9,500, 10,000 seats. It's really hard to get above that without changing a lot of things at the Wanderers ground. So, that also contributes to me thinking that it's going to be really tough to do CFL there. And the final reason is just soccer and football. It's hard to say football, but soccer and football use different size fields.
Yeah.
Right. And that extra, it doesn't seem like a lot, but for a CFL football field that's got the extra 10 yards in the middle, and then it's got 2 end zones that are 20 yards long, that extra 50 yards keeps fans that much further away from the action.
Watching on one soccer at
pitch.
home, I watch most of the away games for the Wanderers. It just looks different.
It's totally different.
It's a bigger venue for some of these teams that, they're going away and playing. But like you said, it just looks better if you have a smaller place that's packed versus a bigger place that has 40% of people there, 30% of people there.
Yeah.
It just looks different. I wanted to ask you about kind of just the impressions, and not really about selling players on coming here, but just the impressions you've seen. Halifax is obviously a unique city. And you said you're from Hamilton, but obviously been here a long time now. It's different than a Toronto or a Vancouver. It's such a sports city, but also everyone knows each other around here. It's a tight knit city. There's the march to the grounds from the bars and stuff like that. What's it been like, just from what you've seen from these players that are from not just all over Canada, all over really the world, coming to Halifax?
Yeah, I think Halifax is an awesome city for, whether you're a young soccer player or you're a young university student, or it's kind of the same demographic, and it's a great place to be, right? And especially right now in the summertime, the city's, it's perfect. You've got the waterfront, you've got all now the beer gardens and the patios, and you've got all of this great stuff to do. I think it from a player recruitment standpoint, it's not as big of a deal maybe as you would think, though. Like, at the end of the day, these guys are all chasing their dream of becoming a professional football player. And I think, the crowd is certainly a big attraction because they want to play in an environment like that and feel that energy. Playing on the grass pitch, I think, is a really big attraction, because everybody would rather play on grass than on artificial turf.
Yeah.
But admittedly, we've got some things going against us too. Like, we don't have our own facility yet, right? So we don't have a place to train to call our own. We train at Soccer Nova Scotia, which, it's fine, but it doesn't feel like,
It's not yours.
Yeah. It's not like a private club,
Wanderers.
Yeah,
place,
like our own place where they've got their own locker that they can go into every day. And so we're working on that, and we hope to have a solution for that soon, but it's something we have to consider. And part of why we launched this Wanderers U23 team and had our first game last night is, we just don't have a lot of players locally yet who are kind of at that level ready to jump into professional football. And what happens is, when you do go to places like, I'll use Forge, for example, because I do put Forge up there as the kind of cream of the crop in the CPL. They're the best team, I think, and they have proven that year over year. But they have the advantage of there being within a 1 hour drive of Hamilton, hundreds and hundreds of really, really talented players. So, we can go up against them to try to convince someone to come play here or play there. But if you're 19, 20 years old and you really are pursuing this dream of being a professional football player, do you want to live at home and still have your parents there to, help you out and take care of you, and maybe you're driving their car and your mom's cooking your food for you and you're getting proper nutrition? Or do you want to take that leap to go live on your own and go out to Halifax, where, these guys have a pretty regimented, lifestyle in season? Like, they're not out all the time. They're training, or they're traveling, and they're trying to get better. So they don't get to enjoy it as much as maybe we do.
Okay.
And it becomes something we really have to work on, which is why we've tried to launch this U23 program to, try to develop that pathway here a bit more, where hopefully in a few years we're in the same situation where we've got 18, 19-year-old kids within 45 minutes of Halifax that we can sign, and they can live at home and kind of get that experience. That
people really get around local players as well. Like Halifax Mooseheads, if there's a local player drafted to them, it's huge.
Yeah. And listen, we'd love nothing more than for that to happen. And that's one of the key tenets of our entire league. Like, it was created to help drive success at the men's national team level. And I think the men's national team has just done way better than any of us thought it would at this point.
It's just taken off.
It's taken off, right? And credit to those guys and those players that have done it, and the women's team who've been doing it for a while. But what a perfect storm of, they're already kind of there. Now we need to kind of keep filling that pipeline behind the success that this current team is having at the national level. So by 2026, when Canada is hosting a World Cup, that team has a few young guns that are on it that hopefully have come from the CPL.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And like there's a couple
dream.
guys that have made the jump to the CPL. I know McNaughton from
what a great story that is.
I forget where he
Pacific.
played. Pacific, yes. And then same thing with Chung as well from Pacific also made the jump to TFC. But you kind of led me into my next question there. Obviously, with the U23, you talked a little bit off camera about that. You said that it was a really good time. You really enjoyed it. It's necessary, as you just stated. I've always wondered with the Wanderers, is an academy ever something that you've ever thought about? Because I think it kind of goes hand in hand, like where you're saying, like, you're able to grow the game, but you're also kind of molding players in the city to play the way that, you know, whoever, say if Steven's still the coach in 5 years' time, that the way that he plays, and you're able to have that system kind of like trickle down where everybody's learning the same tactics, learning the same way to play. Is that something you've ever thought about? Obviously, the U23s is I would say, is kind of like the starting ground, but is an academy where you could compete with like local clubs like Dumbrack and like City and kind of like Suburban?
Yeah, certainly I've thought about it. Yeah. So there's a bunch. It's a really long answer to that question. I think the fast way to answer it is we did our research when we launched, and Edmonton, FC Edmonton, has had a really successful academy for a long time. So they were really kind of one of the only professional soccer teams in the country for a long time. They ran an academy. It's where Alphonso Davies was found. And what we learned when we were starting is that even though they had had this kind of successful academy, what it had done is it had alienated all of the local clubs. So when you talk about competing with Dunbrack or competing with City, because they were competing for players, as you can imagine, then there's some animosity between club and
politics
team.
Come in,
And they're not then going out to support the team. So they're not buying tickets, and they're not willing to promote buying tickets to their members. And it becomes this battle. So knowing that, I was very hesitant to do that because I knew that we really needed the support of all of the clubs. We really needed Soccer Nova Scotia and each of the kind of 7 big clubs in the city to say, this is awesome. We want to get behind this. How do we help? And that's where we started from. It's like, hey, we want to be partners with you guys to grow the game. And we think the best way to keep growing and getting more kids to play soccer is to, you know, help make the Wanderers a bigger thing. The kids see it. They want autographs. They're excited. And then they one day want to play for that, you know, big club. So that was great. And the other thing is just academies are a big thing to take on.
It's more than just soccer, right? There's obviously the education aspect to it, and
billeting. It's really expensive. And to be brutally honest, it's just, you know, we had to get this right first. We've got to get the in-game experience right. We've got to try to figure out, back to my earlier point, how do we get the right players in here that can compete and, you know, keep us in the playoff picture every year and give the fans something really exciting to watch and to look forward to. And you know, the academy thing, even when we started, it was like, okay, let's look at that down the road. And here we are now a few years down the road. And we said, okay, now we're looking at it. Let's look at that first level below us that we can try to, you know, affect some change. So it's the U23 level where, you know, you guys probably know lots of guys that maybe were really good, but once they got to be 18, 19 years old, they didn't really know where to go next, and they just kind of fell off. And I'm just going to go to school and get an education and get a job.
It's funny you say that. That was almost Christian, to be honest.
Right. Well, like Christian's a great example.
Yeah, Christian's a great example of that. So I know exactly where you're coming from when you say that. That was somebody that constantly we were like, man, why don't you go here? Why don't you go there? It's like, you don't understand what it takes to go there, but now that you're giving kids an opportunity here to be able to do that, that's awesome.
So you know, we said, let's start there. Let's start at the U23. Let's try to give some kids that are in those kind of situations a chance to show their stuff and to maybe get one more kick at the can, and then we'll evolve. And the next step will be U21. And then the next step after that might be U19. And then the next step after that might be U17. But we're going to walk, not run as we get into it, and really make sure that we're communicating and talking to Soccer Nova Scotia and the clubs at the same time. Because I do think there's a way that it can all coexist. Where, you know, maybe if we identified a brilliant prodigy like Alphonso Davies was, who's 12 years old, you know, I don't think he should immediately just go to the Wanderers. maybe he signs with Dunbrack. He starts going to Dunbrack and he's part of Dunbrack, but then we're supplementing his training by also coming out to train with the Wanderers.
Yeah.
And there's a team he can play for in non-season, or that's auxiliary to what, he gets to play for with Dunbrack, that he just gets more and more and more training. That to me, and this goes back to Steven. Steven's really uniquely positioned on this, given his role that he used to be the technical director at Soccer Nova Scotia. And he often talks about how they used to have a provincial team. And that provincial team gave all the best players in Nova Scotia. The biggest benefit of it was it gave them all an opportunity to train against the other best kids in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And we're kind of missing that right now, where it doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah,
like
the NTC programs.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're saying, okay, how can we try to create something here that, when you play against better competition, it makes you better.
Definitely.
So how do we help that? And how do we, do that first? And then let's just see where that evolves to and where it evolves to next and evolves to next. And, eventually one day we might have an academy, but I think the academy would be different than maybe what some other academies look like now, where we're not interested in just hoarding everybody and trying to bring the best in. It's how do we kind of build up the whole soccer infrastructure.
Yeah.
I love your patience. Like, everybody that runs a business, I can tell you have so many ideas, and you mentioned we've thought about this, you've thought about that, but you also sound like a very patient person that's not ready to rush into something either. Like you said, start with the U23, then U21. I just think it's so interesting to be able to just take it one step at a time, vision something, and then kind of put it forward. I just wanted to ask you about the growth of the team, really, because like we talked about, you have the Wanderers grounds. Jake mentioned how great, the attendance has been, the game day operations. But as far as jersey sales and all that type of stuff, fan interaction, signing autographs, how's it been since day one until where we are right now?
Yeah, it's been consistently great from day one. I'd say, I guess take a little bit of credit for, just trying to start off the right foot right away. But also credit needs to go to some of the early supporters and people that kind of got behind this idea. And, it's really interesting. One of the things that really helped us, I think, is because the Wanderers grounds is this public piece of land, I had to go public and, make a media announcement about wanting to, do this at the Wanderers grounds. And I had to go sit in front of city council. And when you go in front of city council, it's on TV and people can watch it. It's on Eastlink and it's, all these things. So, what was interesting about that is it gave us an opportunity to figure out who some of our early supporters were, because as soon as that started to bubble up, I was getting emails and calls from people saying, "This is amazing. I can't believe you want to start a soccer team. I've been waiting, for so long to have a soccer team in my hometown to support. This is awesome. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" That kept coming from people. And I remember the day I went to Halifax Council to kind of make the pitch, there were 12 guys standing outside, cheering. And with signs.
No way.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was awesome. It was the beginning of the Privateers,
That's
the
great.
Supporters group. A lot of those same guys are here.
That's awesome.
Are still there. So there's always been that kind of initial spark. And then it's just been this consistent growth of, I started hosting these, after I'd gone to city council, I started hosting these kind of every other month. We would host a little get together at a pub or a restaurant. And I'd invite anybody that was interested in kind of hearing what we were trying to do and support the vision.
Actually, I think I remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I remember the first one, we had 20 people, and the second one we had 30 people, and the third one we had 60 people, and it just kind of had this organic growth. And we really took a lot of time to do that and really get to know the people and talk to them and hear what they wanted and what they didn't want and what to avoid and what were the mistakes and what's unique about how to do this in Halifax. And the kitchen came from one of those meetings. Someone just mentioned it kind of offhand over a beer. It's oh yeah, it's going to be like a kitchen party in there every game. And it's that's awesome. That's exactly what we should call that area. That's the kitchen. Like,
Yeah.
who else in Canada is going to be able to call their, fun supporter section the kitchen?
Yeah,
it's
nobody.
only us,
It's
right?
an original
unique.
idea.
Yeah. But
And I think it's so, sorry to cut you off there. I think that's so uniquely Nova Scotian is just the kitchen party. I think
Totally.
everybody's been to a kitchen party that lives in Nova Scotia or multiple.
Yeah, but then it was just doing things like I remember the FIFA World Cup was going on in what would that have been, 2018? It was 2018 one of the years for FIFA?
Yes.
I think so, wasn't it?
Because I think
Was that the year France won?
Yep.
Yeah, so we hosted a big viewing party on Argyle Street. And it was free. We used it as kind of a promotional thing. It cost me, a couple $1,000 to rent a stage and, put up a big screen and show the game, invited people to come out, put big Wanderers banners up all over the place. And it was like 1,000 people filling Argyle Street from, Dirty Nelly's all the way down to, what would now be the Carlton, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was moments like that where I was like, okay, like we've got something here. Like there is definitely a genesis of a crazy fan base. We just have to keep making good decisions and keep doing things the right way, and it all kind of worked out.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to that time. I think you said you had limited time there, so I'm just gonna ask you one more question, and then I'm not sure if Andrew has a follow up, and we'll let you go. We appreciate you coming to talk to us, but I just want to ask about, and this is something I ask a lot of people that are involved with the Wanderers, particularly with the players. I've asked Steven a couple times. What do you make of like the growth of the league as a whole? Because I feel like as a season ticket holder from year 1 to year 3 and then now year 4, media pass, like getting to be able to go to the games, get to see every home game, watching all the away games, and even starting to get more into like just the league in general. I think there's been a massive jump in quality, in terms of how the league's run, just everything surrounding the league. What is your take on it as somebody that's right in the thick of it, that has a part to play in making sure that the league's growing?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there has been a significant jump, specifically on the field. I think in that way there's been a really huge improvement in the quality of players that we have. The first year, as you can appreciate, people were unsure, like, what is this league? Is it for real? Is it not? So some of the better Canadian players who were maybe playing in the USL or were playing over in Europe at levels that could have been, that are now kind of comparable to us, but there was a hesitancy to come back because they wanted, rightly so, to kind of say, hey, is this going to be for real or is it, a joke?
Yeah.
Then we got through the first year, and I think, we worked really hard. Some mistakes were made for sure, but, overall, I think it was a success, like right across the board in all the markets. Then COVID hit. So COVID really slowed us down, and I think you're seeing now this year what I thought where we'd be in year 2. So we're kind of 2 years behind because of that experience. But I think we've got some really exciting things happening. Like you look at Ottawa, for example.
Yeah.
Their fan base is really starting to grow. Like they're really getting some energy there in their stadium, and they're getting a solid, consistent fan base out over and over and over again, which is important that you've got some of the bigger cities in Ontario that are really kind of into it.
Yeah.
Calgary's done a great job with what they've done. I think Pacific's done a great job.
Definitely.
They get some really great crowds there, and they've got a nice little stadium, kind of like ours. So it's got some character and it's unique. The CFL markets are tough just because of the size of the stadiums. Like in Hamilton, they're not getting, I think, as many as they'd like out to the Forge games, but they're working on it. But I do think it comes down to atmosphere, same as in Winnipeg. Beautiful building, amazing. Beautiful stadium there, but it's so big that it's just really hard to create that
sort of atmosphere.
It's a social thing. It's like psychology. Hey, were you there? Were you there at that packed event going on? I don't care what it was, but I was there.
Yeah.
Versus at a huge football stadium, it's a little bit different. I just wanted to ask you about really just the players that come back versus whether it's like negotiations or players go somewhere else to play. It's been described as like a developmental league, but really we could call it that, but you also want to have the same players there as well as last year. That's how I think fans can establish things. And I found that with a team like the Halifax Hurricanes, that was one of the biggest problems I found, not just with the, venue being too big, but every year the roster was different.
Yeah.
So is it important to you guys to have that, continuous, okay, this guy's still here from last year, this guy's here? You want to bring in new guys, new signings, but is it important for you guys to have, the Garcias, the Rampersads still back?
Yeah, it's a great question. Matt and I spoke for about an hour and a half today on this very thing, and just, we're in a really unique situation as a league. And yes, what's really unique about soccer is that you can develop these players and sell them for a profit. Like, that doesn't happen in other sports, right? So it has to be part of your business model. And again, if you go back to why we started the league, it was to help develop Canadian players. So, we do have to accept our place in the global soccer scene and realize that there are better places that players can go. Back to my point of, you want to get the best competition you can get, it's going to help them to move on and play in Europe or to play somewhere else. It's going to make them a better player. So we want to see that happen. But there is this balance of, how many players do you bring in with an eye towards developing them and hopefully, being really happy for them that they move on after 1 or 2 years, which on our team, you could look at a guy like Sam Salter and say that, right? Where he came into us as a U21. We saw great potential in him. He realized that potential somewhat last year. Like, he did okay. He didn't tear it up, but he did well. We brought him back this year, and now he's doing really well. And he's only, 21 and a half years old. So he's the kind of guy that has the potential to keep taking those steps and moving on. But then you maybe have some other guys that you really want to make kind of the backbone of your team, who fans fall in love with and want to see back year after year. So like, you bring up a guy like Rampersad, who, might be able to go play at another level, but he's a little bit older. And he's probably looking more at this as a real place for him to kind of make a life. And with a guy like that, like, he's the kind of guy you just want to sign to a long-term deal. He's the captain of your team. He plays his heart out every single game. He's the kind of player fans love because he just gives it everything he's got every single minute he's out there. That's the kind of guy that you really want to have kind of for a few years that fans can get behind and fall in love with.
Right.
But it is a balance, and again, back to, I think, one of our first conversation points. At the end of the day, we do need to be competitive. And, we are in professional sport, and it does matter. They do keep score, and the standings matter, and you need to kind of do well. And if you don't do well, these guys know that, and they know the kind of contract they're signing too, that if they don't perform, it's our job to always be looking for guys to replace them.
Are you able to tell us about that at all? About the contract, salary cap, anything like that with negotiations?
No, well, I don't think we've ever made the salary cap public.
I was going to say, I don't never
think we have. Yeah, so I shouldn't let this be the.
I had to ask
yeah.
you. So.
Yeah, I think we're very fair. We are a fledgling, still startup kind of league, but again, we've created an industry that didn't exist 4.5-5 years ago. So there are guys now who are making a living. They don't have to have other jobs. This is their job. Is it the most high-paying job? No, not yet. But it's a job, and it pays the bills. And they're a professional soccer player.
Yeah, they're living their dream.
And they're living their dream. So I'm proud of that. And I don't ever feel bad or let anybody try to make me feel bad that we're not paying enough yet.
I was more so just asking.
No, I wasn't accusing you. Yeah.
I was more so just asking if, like, for example, you wanted to sign like a star player, if one person would take up a bulk of a cap type of thing.
Well, that's always a conversation too, right? Is you can decide to build your team that way. Mm-hmm. So you could say, okay, we're going to sign 2 or 3 superstars that we're going to pay. 3 guys are going to get 30% of our budget, and then we have to fill out the rest of the roster with guys who are going to make less
like the
than the average.
Well, and I actually kind of led into my next question. This is the only thing that I'll say before we go, just because it was what I was going to ask, but you kind of touched about it. So like someone like João Morelli, like he had like I think he had a very high pedigree before coming to the league, and what's it like to try to convince someone like that who was able to play at like the second division in England and try to get him to come over and obviously like see the success, but how hard is it to get somebody like that who necessarily isn't trying to prove themselves, that has already kind of proved themselves?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that's why Zhao is a bit of the exception in the league. There haven't been a lot of international signings that have come in and had the impact that Zhao was able to come in and have. And some of that is his pedigree. Some of it's just his personality and his the fight that he has in him to succeed and do well. It's a tough one to generalize. I think every situation's a little bit different. Sometimes it could just be where they've ended up. They're just unhappy in that location, whatever country they've ended up in. It's maybe felt a little nomadic and they aren't loving it for whatever reason. And Canada, I think sometimes we forget living here. We complain about the, mundane little things, but in the grand scheme of things, Canada's a really great country to live in. And I think you really start to appreciate that when you meet these guys and you talk to a lot of them that are coming from other places where, this is a pretty cool place to be. And that's a big draw, like the chance to go to Canada, to live in Canada. For us, like we said before, the attraction of the city, the venue, the fans, the grass, like we really push that all forward to these guys when we're trying to recruit them. Sometimes you just get lucky, you know, like, for sure. Like Matt, you give him credit. He found Zhao through his own kind of work. It wasn't a scouting service. It wasn't a league provided thing. It was, Matt finding him and saying, this guy looks really good. I got to kind of reach out to him and talk to him. And lo and behold, after a while, he got him here. So, similar to our recent signing, Fumpa.
Yeah, we actually got to talk to him after the game.
Yeah,
Very
really
nice guy too.
Great guy. Yeah, great guy. But maybe he might be a perfect example of how I think it works. Where really talented guy kind of came up through the English football system, which for you guys that know soccer, just kind of chews players up and spits them out. Like there's just so many. It's like hockey here, right? Like when it's the national sport, there's always another guy ready. And he got disillusioned a little bit with it because it just hadn't worked out. And then he was kind of ready to give it up and had taken some time off and then felt the love of the game kind of bring him back. So he went and played in Welsh football, which isn't even at the level of the CPL.
Yeah.
But he was so talented that he was standing out there. And, Matt found him and found him through a couple of different avenues. But, you're willing to take a chance on a guy like that because you can see he's got something. But his attitude is also, I'm going to give you everything I've got because this is my last chance. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to succeed or I'm going to die trying. Yeah. And those are the guys that we want.
Exactly. We actually got to talk to him after the game, and that was kind of the attitude that I got was like, this is a guy, like he came on for, only 25 minutes, but like those whole 25 minutes, it was like, I don't think there was a better player on the field when he came on that game. Like
he changed everything.
And just the thing that I loved about him too was that he was just so personable. Like he was so thankful to be here, and he was just so appreciative. And I think, like you said, that those are the type of people you want. But I feel like we might have kept you long enough.
Yeah.
So
that's all right. It's fun.
We feel privileged, like as a startup company, to be able to do media work with the Wanderers. So. First of all, I want to thank you for that and the entire Wanderers organization for letting us be there in the media rooms and interview players, because it's been great for us, and hopefully we can provide something for you guys as far as exposure for the fans and things like that. And of course, thank you for your time. Hopefully we didn't keep you too late and ask too many questions, but thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say, I'm really happy that you guys are doing this and that we can help in a small way because, we're not just trying to start up a soccer infrastructure here. Like we're trying to really build the sport infrastructure. And I told you guys my story. When I came here, there was nowhere to go work in sport. I had to kind of create my own thing. And you guys are doing the same thing for yourselves now. And I think we can all be part of, trying to build up this whole sport business system. And in 20 years, when we're all looking back at it and there's maybe multiple sport radio shows and there's podcasts and all, you'll be able to say, hey, we helped be there at the beginning to get this thing started. So good on you guys for taking this on.
We appreciate it. Yeah. Is there any advice before we let you go that as a successful businessman as yourself?
Just stick with it. Yeah. Stick with it. Like it's amazing how often there's opportunities. Like I use being an athlete as the greatest source of business advice I guess I could ever give. So, when you're a sports guy, you the value of being on a team. Yep. The value of putting work in and getting results out. If you dog it and don't do anything at practice, you're going to likely have a shitty game. You know that if you've got a teammate who you see dogging it and not doing anything, you're going to get really pissed off and upset at him because he's not putting in as much work as you are. And I think all of those things are exactly what it takes to be successful in business. Like you guys are a team, you got to work together. You got to make sure you're each kind of pulling your weight to make this go. And when you lose, because you'll inevitably lose at something, right? Something will go wrong. You won't get the money you thought you were going to get. You'll be struggling at some point financially. It's like that moment in a game where you just have to decide, am I going to give in and give up and, just wait for the clock to run out and go home and lose? Or am I going to keep fighting until the final whistle? And if you've got that attitude of fighting until the final whistle, you're not going to win them all, but I do think you're going to win more than you lose. And I've seen it over and over again with people that have come and gone while I've been doing this, and even my own experience. Like there were lots of times I could have just shut it down, but I was too stubborn and just kind of kept going and kept going.
We're here to stay.
Eventually you get to the other side, but then it's never the other side either. Like I also know that this whole thing is perilous. It's like I told you guys with momentum being good and bad. I know that we've got to work at it every day. We can't take it for granted that we've had success so far. We've got to keep going and keep going and keep going, and make sure we keep making good decisions and keep trying to build and go forward. And it never stops.
Well, I hope I certainly learned a lot.
Definitely.
I think fans around the league, Halifax, community members will appreciate this as much as we did. So thank you very much. On behalf of Derek, Jacob, my co-host, and Noah behind the camera, this has been episode 2 of the Mayflower Sports Podcast.